Okay, what's happening? Here's lesson number 2. It says find the product. So what we have here is a -8, a parentheses, and a -12. Basically, the parentheses means it's not minus, okay? So we have a -8 and a -12, but I see no operator. Well, if you don't have an operator, you want to put a dot because it means multiplication, okay? Now your multiplication, we do not use a number line for multiplication. You just have to know two basic rules. Negative times a negative is a positive product, and a negative times a positive is a negative product. Duh. Okay, so first off, the product's a negative times a negative. That's a positive. And then you can take your calculator and find 8 times 12. Okay. 96. I don't want you to use the negative sign on your calculator on this. Okay, 5, the operator's multiplication, and -4.1. So a positive times a negative, the product's going to be negative. Okay. So 5 times -4.1, -20.5. Okay, next problem. 10, and then a parentheses, -2.5. Okay. All right, so I have a 10, I have a -2.5, but I see no operator. You know, like a plus, a minus. So the operator's multiplication. By the way, when I say operator, I mean plus, minus, times, divide. The 4 operators. Okay, so positive times a negative, that's going to be a negative product. And then I find the product of 10 and -2.5. That's -25. Okay, next. Now it's fractions, so I can punch those in on my calculator. So it's a product, and I can see that we have 1/9, the operators times -3/4. So it's a negative times a negative, which is a positive. Okay, and then you can take 1/9 times 3/4. 1 ABC 9 times 3 ABC 4. Okay, I got 1/12. Now, for those of you who don't know how that works, you take 1/9 times 3/4. You don't need a common denominator, but you compare. So 1's an irrelevant factor, but you look at 3. Do 3 and 9 have a common factor that can go into 3 and 9 evenly? Well, probably 3. So if I divide 3 by 3, it's 1. If I divide 9 by 3, it's 3. And that is how you get 1/12. Okay. All right. -2/11 and -11/2. And the operator needs to be times since I see no operator. Okay. Funny thing's going to happen. -2 ABC 11 times -11. ABC2. By the way, the product is positive because it's a negative times a negative. So 2/11 times 11/2. And I got 1. Now the reason why that happened is because whenever you multiply two reciprocals, 2/11, 11/2, the product is always going to be 1 whole. Okay, now, so basically negative times a negative is positive, positive, negative times positive is negative. Okay, -1.2, and then to the second power. This is what's called a power, okay? This is known as your base, and the little 2 is known as your exponent. You probably learned that in middle school. Base, exponent. What you do is you write the base however many times as the exponent says, so it'd be twice. So -1.2, -1.2, and that's a multiplication problem. Exponents are always multiplying. So the product of a negative and a negative is a positive, and then you probably want to punch in 1.2 times 1.2, which is 1.44. Okay, 3/4 to the second power. This is my base. 2 is my exponent. So I write that base, yes, the fraction, twice. And it's a multiplication problem, so I can just multiply the numerators 3 by 3 to get 9, and the denominator 4 by 4 to get 16. So it's 9/16. And that was just a positive times a positive. Okay, the base is -2/5, and the exponent's 2. So I write my base out twice, and that means multiplication. We know it's a negative times a negative, which is a positive, and 2 times 2 is 4. And what's 5 times 5? 25. If you don't put the plus in front of it, it's not a big deal, but if it's negative, you need to put the negative. Okay, now we're doing quotient, but the same rules apply, okay? Dividing and multiplying as far as the sign of what the answer is going to be, it's the same rules. So we have a negative and a positive. So a negative and a positive make a negative. Then I just divide 84 by 14. 6, negative 6. Okay, here a positive and a negative, so that's negative the quotient's going to be. And then I divide 63 by 21. Remember the fraction line, when you see a line, that means division. Okay, that's a division sign, not a subtraction. Can't see it very well. Okay, so it's dividing. Negative and a positive makes a negative. And then I take 8.1 divided by 9, so 0.9. Okay, positive and a negative, the quotient's negative. So 7.5 divided by, when you divide by number by something less than 1, it's going to come out larger than the number you started with every time, so 25. I know that seems weird, but when you divide by a decimal less than 1 whole, 0 point anything, it's going to come out greater than the number we started with. Okay, negative 5 divided by negative 5 over 3. Well, I know the quotient's positive. Now let's see what 5 divided by 5 ABC3 is. I got 3. Now here's how that happens, okay? You can make your integer a fraction if you put a 1 under it. So we have 5 over 1. And if I have to do this by hand, I make the division into a multiplication. And then I flip this fraction, second fraction upside down to 3 over 5. So I don't need the common denominator, but I look for factors I can divide by. Well, I can divide 5 and 5 by 5. So that would be 5 divided by 5 is 1. 5 divided by 5 is 1. So we have 1 times 3, which is 3. 1 times 1 is 1. And when I have a numerator over 1, the answer is just the integer. Okay, division, negative, positive, so that's a negative. And I take 12 divided by 12 ABC 13 divided by 12 ABC 13. Whoops, didn't get it in right. That's 1, negative 1. And the reason that works is because if I have 12 over 13 for my first fraction, change that into a multiplication problem, I would flip this over to 13 over 12. And then 12 and 12 can both be divided by 12, which would be 1 and 1. And you can only do this with 1 on top and 1 on bottom. That's a 1, that's a 1. So if I have 1s everywhere, then the whole product's 1, and then the negative and positive made negative. Okay, now, here's where the money's going to be made at. You get more expressions with variables, and now you get some numbers with those variables. So A is negative 6, B is 1 over 4, and C is 16. You don't need to make this little box here. I just did it to show you some things. Remember what we do. We parenthesize the variables and then empty those parentheses. So negative 3, parentheses, minus 4, parentheses. Okay, so my A is negative 6, and my B holds a fraction value of 1/4. Now, after you get the parentheses filled in, you need to know right now, before you jump the gun, what the operator is between all my values. So I have a negative 3 and a negative 6, okay? There is no operator, so the operator's times, okay, automatically. And then between my negative 6 and 4, that's not a negative 4, that's a subtraction sign. Between the negative 6 and 4, we have a subtraction sign. But remember my rule about subtractions. I want them to become addition, and then we need to do something else. So am I minusing a negative or a positive right here? Looks to me like I'm minusing a positive, so I go plus, negative. So the operator here is plus, okay? And then between your -4 and 1/4, okay, there's no sign, so the operator's times, okay? So go through all the numbers and you got to know the operator. Okay, now circle the numbers you're multiplying. So I'm going to circle these numbers. You want to do multiplication first. Any dots you got to take care of first. You need to do all your timesing first. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, multiplication always comes before adding. So I take -3 times -6, which is 18, and then the addition operator. And then -4 times 1/4, -1. Negative times a negative is a positive. Negative times a positive is a negative. Okay. Now think number line. If I'm at 18 and I'm adding a negative, I'm going to move to the left. So 1, and that takes me to 17. Go to your number line. You want to do the multiplying, but then go to your number line at the end. -3 ABC. So I put up parentheses around the A, the B, and the C. Okay. So I have -3. Now empty all three of those parentheses. Now A is -6, B is 1/4, and C is 16. Oh yeah, by the way, I made this box because I wanted to show you why 4 and 1/4 multiply to 1. So 4 times 1/4. Well, I can put a 1 under the integer, and then these can both be divided by 4, and then it's just 1. And it's a negative times a positive, so it's -1. Okay, -3 and -6. There's no operator, so it's times. -6 and 1/4. No operator, so it's times. 1/4 and 16. No operator, so it's times. So they're all times. So guess what? You can punch it all in on your calculator. But there are two negatives. And what's a negative times a negative? It's a positive. So I know this product's positive. So 3 times 6. I want you to know the multiplication rule for whether it's negative or positive. I'm not anti-calculator, but you should know your negative positive rules for multiplication. 72. And how you get that is, let's say you can times, the commutative property of multiplication means you can times in any order. So if I were to times those two, the reason you didn't end up with a fraction is because if you make 16 an integer, you can divide these both by 4. That's a 1 and a 4. So that's going to be 4 over 1, which is 4. So -3, -6, and 4, that multiplies to 72. Okay. Get parentheses around the variables A and C, and then empty your parentheses. So you got a 2 parentheses divided by parentheses -3, and then another parentheses, and then you need if you have 2 open parentheses, you need 2 to close. So A is -6. C is 16. So between 2 and -6, we have no operator, so that's times. Between the -6 and -3, we have a division sign, that's good. Between the -3 and 16, we have no operator, so that means times as well. So let's do the timesing first. So that is going to be -12, because a positive negative is negative. 2 times 6 is 12, and then the division operator. Negative times a positive is a negative, and 3 times 16 is 48. Okay, now it's division, so a negative and a negative in division make a positive, and then we need to simply punch in our first number, our first factor 12, divided by our second factor 48. Now 48 doesn't go into 12, it's less than 1 whole, so 0.25 would be the answer. Okay, next one, 16b minus 3c. So let's parenthesize our variables. So I've got 16 minus 3, and b is going to be 1/4, and c is going to be 16. Okay, 16 and 1/4, there's no operator, so it's multiplication. There is an operator here with minus. However, I don't like the minus operator. I need to make it plus, but then I have to change the 3. Am I subtracting -3 or +3? Looks positive to me, so I go plus negative, okay? And now I have the addition operator that I always wanted. Okay, now between the -3 and the 16, we have no operator, so that is times. Okay. Now we do our times first. Circle the two products you have to find. So 16 times 1/4, it's like finding 1/4 of 16. That would be 4. Positive, a positive, so it's +4. And then the plus operator. And then negative times a positive is a negative. And 3 times 16 is 48. Now I know our number line does not go out to add. We want to use our number line, but I know it doesn't go out to 48. That's fine. If you're way out here at 48, or at 4, sorry, 4. You would move to the left because you're adding a negative. So there's 4, 25, you know, you got to kind of use it. I think I'd be way out there, okay? So from 4 to 0 would be 4 units. That'd be 29 units, okay? Just kind of use your head a second. What do you think it could be? Or if you run off the number line, you can punch it into your calculator. But anything you can get to on the number line, I don't want the calculator used. But this one, you know, is what it is. Okay, so let's kind of rehash this. Here's the steps you want to follow. Write them down if you want. Okay. So replace variables. Know the operator. Remember, we don't like the operator subtraction. Okay. Either make it, if you're minusing a positive, it goes plus negative. If you're minusing a negative, it goes plus plus, okay? And then you do your multiplying first. And after that, you use your number line if you have to add. Alright, now let's look at something called square roots. This is really easy. Square root of 81. There's a number multiplied by itself that gives us a product of 81. What's the number? Well, it's not. Is it 5 times 5? Is 5 times 5 81? Is 4 times 4 81? No, I think it's 9. Okay? So it's 9. Okay, what times what equals 36? Got to be the same number. Probably 6, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, if you see the negative, not a big deal. Just put a negative, and then what times what equals 49? 5, is it 4 times 4, you know? Oh yeah, 7 times 7. So that square root of 49 is 7, but with that negative in front, it's 7. Okay, fractions aren't a big deal. Okay, its answer is going to be a fraction. So you actually have to do kind of two problems in one. What times what's 16? What times what's 25? Well, I know 4 times itself is 16, so 4 is on top. 5 times 5 is 25, so 5 is on bottom, so 4/5. Remember the negative, you put the negative. What times what equals 4? What times what equals 9? Well, I think it's 2 times 2, so the numerator is 2. And what times what's 9? Well, 3 times 3. So the denominator is 3, so negative 2/3. Okay, now with decimals, you got to know how to do the square root on your calculator. With these calculators, you hit the second button right there. See where my hand, I hit that. Nothing comes up other than this little thing down here that says second, okay? And then I hit this X to the second power key, okay? Make sure you hit second and then X to second, and a square root pops up with a parentheses. Now you just enter the number in you want to square root. So 0.16, 0.4. Now this plus, positive, negative, just put those both in front. It means it could be either one. Okay, 6.4. So again, decimal. So I don't know, it's not an integer. So second, x to the second, and that pops up, and then punch in 6.4. Okay, 2.52. Now I want it round everything in algebra when it's a decimal like this, I round to the nearest hundredth. So I got 2.5 for sure, and then 2. Would that stay 2 or would it go up to 3? Well, the next number is a 9, so I think it would go up to 53. So plus minus 2.53. All right, that's all I have to say on that. So basically, in a synopsis, negative times a negative is a positive. Positive times a negative is a negative. Same in addition, in division. Okay. And with these letter problems, I'm really key you do those right. You replace the variables, empty them. Know your operator, okay, between any two numbers. You got to know that, okay? Remember, don't like the operator minus. If it is, change it to plus, but then you got to do something with the number after it. Find your multiplication products first, and then do your addition. Do the addition on a number line if you can get there.